Right, ladies, we're going to go ahead and get started with our morning. That egg casserole was delicious. Anyone else think it was so yummy? I loved it. Nice, warm casserole on a cold morning was lovely. Go ahead and grab your worksheets, grab your pens. We are going to dive in today to a topic that we've entitled The Nurturing Home, Cultivating a Haven for Your Family. A couple weeks ago when we were talking about when we had our Q&A, our Ask Anything Day, one of the questions that came up was how do you keep peace when everything in the world seems so riddled with anxiety and scary and all these different things? Like, how do you teach your kids how to maintain peace and not spiral, and how do you do that yourself? Well, one of the incredible ways that God has given us to be able to do that is through the safety and comfort of, firstly and primarily, the family, giving us this structure in which children can grow and thrive and live. And as the women of the home, we have the very unique opportunity and position to be able to really cultivate the way that our home looks, the way that our home feels, the way that our home smells. And so for us as wives, moms, it's a super important topic to think long and hard about, what does this really look like? And what type of home do I want my family, my children to be experiencing? And for me, one of the answers to that question is I really, really want my home to be a haven. I want my home to be this safe place of refuge that my husband and my children and extension, their friends, our family, can come to and feel peaceful, can feel cared for, can feel intentionally loved. And so we're going to talk about what that looks like today. But I thought, because haven isn't necessarily a word that we use all the time, I thought giving a definition would be helpful. So haven is a place of safety or refuge. And I think all of us as wives and moms would agree that we want that for our home. We want our homes to be that place that not only we can come to that is safe and a refuge, but we want to offer that for our families. So as we get started on this topic of how do we even begin to do that, I think the first step that we need to take is to acknowledge the importance of your role. So point number one is acknowledge the importance of your role. And what I mean by that is your unique position, like I said, as the woman of the house, as the wife, as the mom, as the one who is really setting that tone and implementing things in your home for the way that not only your family, but other people are going to experience your environment when they step into it. And that's a pretty high calling when you think about that we are the ones that are responsible and have such a big hand in what people are going to experience when they come into our home. And God, time and time again, gives this level of responsibility to women. In Proverbs 31, which is that really famous passage all about the excellent wife, one of the things that is described about this woman is that she looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. And so it's this idea that the wife, the mom, the woman of the home is someone that is intentionally, thoughtfully, strategically looking well to the ways of her household. And that does take a lot of energy, a lot of sacrifice, a lot of intentionality. If we just sit back and do nothing, this type of home is not going to be the product of a lackadaisical or passive attitude. This type of home is one that takes thought, intention, action, the opposite of idleness. Later on in this verse, Proverbs 31 comes in the Old Testament, but later on in the New Testament, in Titus 2, God gives explicit instructions that women are to to look to the ways of their household, that they are to be the ones that are to be working at home. That's not a statement of exclusivity, meaning that women can only work in the home, but it is a statement of priority, that us as the wives and the moms and the women of the home need to have our home and the way that it runs and functions as a really high level on our priority list. It needs to really be near the top of how we are organizing our time, our intention, our energy, should be towards looking well to the ways of our household. So with that, we're going to talk about all of that. That's God's rules, that's God's law, that's God's commands in action, right? But what is so neat about the Lord so often is that we see the benefits of obeying him and of following his commands in everyday life. And so I thought a lot of this research was very interesting, speaking of all of the benefits of a child, a family growing up in a home that is safe, that is nurturing, that is organized, that is a haven. And so the American Academy of Pediatrics say that children who feel safe at home are less likely to experience stress and anxiety, which helps them form healthy emotional attachments. So if we want to raise kids that are healthily relating to not only their peers, but also adults around them, then this should be a really high priority for us, making a home that is safe and secure. Additionally, it reduces the risk of childhood illness and injuries when we are keeping a tidy, safe home. I mean, that's kind of like a no duh, right? That's why we all childproof our homes when we have those little infants and toddlers running around. Additionally, according to research conducted by the National Center for Education Statistics, children who live in stable and safe homes are more likely to perform better academically. And a stable and non-chaotic home reduces distractions and stress, allowing children to better focus on their studies and fully participate at school. So the more that a child's home life is predictable, organized, free of chaos and stress, the more freed up their little tiny brains are going to be fully engaged in whatever it is they're doing. Even children can take on our stress, our anxiety, our lack of order, chaos, and that will oftentimes show up in them being very distracted in their school settings or even extracurricular activities. Next, the Library of Medicine found that children who live in safe and nurturing environments are more likely to develop strong social connections. So again, it's that healthy relation to other people, and they have better interpersonal skills just by living in a safe and nurturing home environment. You guys have all probably heard this phrase before: if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And that is truly a funny thing. And I love this woman's expression on her face with her rolling pin. She's all irritated and annoyed with that stank face on. But again, this just goes back to acknowledging the importance of our role. We have the unique position that we really set the tone of our entire home. And so acknowledging that and remembering that and calling that to mind often can be really helpful as we seek to create a place that is a haven for our family. So hopefully it won't ever be said of us, oh yeah, my mom wasn't happy, so nobody in the house was happy, with that stank face. Next, not only do we need to acknowledge the importance of our role, but after we've really identified the importance of our role, taken on that responsibility, we can sit up a little taller, straighten up our shoulders a little more, okay, we are ready. We are ready to take this on and face it head on, because yes, this is the type of home and environment that we want to foster in our lives. So the next step would be to imitate God's example. We want to imitate the example that God has set for us by, and I'll give you a whole list of things to do. But I really want us to think about the fact that God, in and of himself, created the place for us to live, right? He created the world. He set certain things in motion that make our world, albeit stained by sin and death and destruction right now, which was not his original design, but the introduction of sin into our world, disobedience towards him, resulted in all of those other things. But even still, we get to experience so much of the beauty, order, hospitable nature that God has made for us to live in and enjoy. And so we can really pause and look at his example of how he has set up our home, being the earth, and learn from that and say, okay, if this is God's example of how he has set things up for me to live in this environment, how can I then imitate that as the caretaker of my home and the environment that I am creating in my own little sphere of the world? So we want to imitate God's example first and foremost by creating order. If we want to make our homes into a haven, the first and foremost way that we can do that is by being someone that creates order from chaos. And the reality is that being a mom, especially in the little years, can lend itself to a lot of chaos. But I want us to pause for a second and look at the way that God brings order and structure from seeming chaos in the very first verses of the Bible. So I don't have it up there, but I am going to read for you from Genesis 1 through 9. So you can feel free to go back and look at that later if you want to get your own eyes on it. But just listen as I explain that and really think about it from that perspective. How is God creating order out of chaos, or bringing order and precision to the world that he creates? It says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. And God said, 'Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters.' And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse," meaning the sky, "from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. And God said, 'Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let dry land appear.' And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good." Do you see that organization, that order, that structure, that thoughtfulness, even bringing light into somewhere that is dark, even creating the predictability of evening and morning? God brings order into the world that we live in. And we would do very well to think intentionally and slowly about how can we bring better order and structure into our homes. I thought this was a fun little thing that I started doing as I was preparing to teach this, but I was starting to think about what is all of the ways that we see order in creation. And so the first way I thought of that we see order in creation is by natural law. And what do the natural laws of our universe give to us? It ensures predictability in our lives, right? The law of gravity ensures that I am not going to go floating off into the ether at any given moment. The law of gravity reminds me that if I were to drop this little clicker, it's going to fall and clatter to the ground. I know exactly what is going to happen because of the natural laws that God has built into our world. It ensures predictability. I then am not waking up in the morning like wringing my hands and feeling freaked out that today's the day I'm going to float off into space. I know what's going to happen today because of the natural law and the order that God has brought to our earth. The next thing is galactic structure. If you think about the planets, the alignment even of our earth to the sun, the ratios of our earth to the sun, the fact that if our earth were just slightly further from the sun, we would all freeze. And if it was slightly closer to the sun, we would all burn up and die. Galactic structure ensures organization and not chaos. Even in the way that our moon rotates the earth, even in the way that we get our month because of that cyclical pattern, even in the way that the tides relate to the moon's gravitational pull. All of this is built in. It gives us predictability, it gives us organization, and it ensures that we don't live in a constant state of chaos. And when you stop and think about it, that is all really, really good. Because if none of those things were actually happening, we would be living in a state of, it would be scary. It'd be super scary, it'd be super chaotic, and we would be so stressed about what's gonna happen today that we wouldn't be able to get anything else done, just like we talked about with our children. The next thing is biological organisms. We see order in creation through biological organisms. And this has to do with structure, even like you think of your DNA, the double helix, do you guys remember from biology? You think of the golden ratio that appears all over creation in the way that bees form their hives and the way that petals form on flowers. Again, we see that in outer space and the alignment of the planets. This golden ratio of like perfection is seen all over creation, specifically in biological organisms. And that establishes structure, pattern, and precision. That not only brings order, but it also brings beauty, which is foreshadowing of what we'll talk about later. How can we implement those things in our home? So if we first were to look at natural laws ensuring predictability, what is the thing that ensures predictability in our home? Well, it's clear, consistent expectations. When we have clearly given our expectations to our children, and when we are consistent in sticking with them, that provides our children, everyone in our home, with predictability. They're not second guessing, is this something mom's gonna be okay with today? Or is this something that's going to cause a huge reaction that I'm going to get yelled out for today? So the first step of that is not only clearly giving expectations, but the second part of that is sticking with consistency. If you have said, for example, in my home, boys, I expect that your room is picked up and tidied every night before you get in bed, and that your school clothes are laying out on the floor, like ready to go for the next day, then I better be ready to consistently hold them to that expectation. When I fail to consistently hold them to that expectation, that is when we lose all predictability, and that stability and that structure and that safety net goes away for our children. So it's not just the clear expectation, but it's the consistency of implementing the expectations that we have set. And my expectations may look way different from your household, and that's totally okay. But whatever they are, communicate them to your family. If you want all the dishes, you want the whole family to help with picking up all the dishes, putting them away, washing them, getting them in the dishwasher, whatever your routine is at the end of the night, then clearly communicate that to them, and then consistently hold that expectation. Where we as moms sometimes get tripped up is that we want not only our husbands, but we also want our children to be mind readers. And when they fail to be able to do the impossible, which is read our minds, then that's suddenly where we'll get angry or these outbursts will come into play. So clearly expressing the expectation and then being consistent with it. Next, tidiness. If we can keep a tidy home, please note, I didn't say a perfect home. I didn't say an HGTV worthy model home. I said a tidy home. A home that is put together, a home where you know where to find things, where your husband and children know where to find things. Just tidy, where it's clean of debris and things all over the floor. It ensures that organization, and not chaos. And the truth of the matter is, everyone thrives in that situation, whether it's ourselves and our own brain being not so scattered and knowing where things belong, even visually not having the equivalent of like crazy loud static in our ears is the same visually when there's stuff all over the place, right? It causes that same sort of distraction for us when things are all over the place. And so keeping a tidy home is what ensures that organization and not chaos. Last, traditions. This is where the fun part comes in of creating order. Traditions bring structure, those patterns, the precision, and also fun. When we establish traditions in our home, it brings all of these things, but it also brings an element of looking forward to that specific thing. So, for example, one of the traditions that we have, this is a very easy one to pinpoint, but one of the traditions that we have is for a birthday, whoever's birthday it is in the house, our dining room gets all decorated. And that person knows and expects that when they come downstairs on their birthday morning, the dining room will be specifically, thoughtfully, carefully decorated just for them, to celebrate them. It's something that our kids look forward to. It's something that I look forward to. Now that I have a 19-year-old and 18-year-old daughter, like they do it for me now, and it's awesome, and I love it. I love being able to take part in the tradition. Another tradition that we have is that we always go get Slurpees on the last day of school. It's like such a silly and random tradition, and it costs like $5, but it's something that the kids so look forward to. And they know that on the last day of school every year, we are going to get Slurpees, and that officially kicks off our summer. Whatever traditions it is that you can think of, whether it's around birthdays, maybe it's not even something that's annual, maybe it's something that's monthly, a monthly tradition that you do, a specific dinner that you have, a specific activity that you go and you do as a family, or that a game night that you guys have at home. Those traditions establish structure, patterns, precision, and they bring in fun into our homes. The next way that we can imitate God's example, and I kind of alluded to this a second ago, is by creating beauty. By really taking pride in the spaces that God has entrusted to us and thinking creatively, how can I bring beauty into this place that is pleasing for all the senses? The Bible describes in Psalm 19:1 that the heavens declare the glory of God and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. God has created for us a very visually, we get to experience his beauty with all of our senses, whether it's with our eyes, our ears, taste, sound, touch. He has given so many expressions of beauty in this world that we live in. But I love this verse in particular because it talks about the sky above proclaiming his handiwork. And I can't remember if I've mentioned it in here before or in a women's workshop, but I am a NASA nerd. I follow them on Instagram. I geek out when like a telescope has like new images. Like I love all things outer space. And this image is a real picture from the Webb telescope from NASA. This is literally from NASA's website, and it is a new galaxy forming. Isn't that gorgeous? Like, it is stunningly beautiful. It doesn't even look real, right? It looks like that somebody painted it or somebody drew it. This is a real photograph from NASA. Stunningly, visually, so gorgeous and appealing. But we don't even have to look up and into outer space in order to see God's beauty. We see his beauty and we smell and we hear his beauty in somewhere like Banff, the national park in Canada. In the Scotland Highlands, this is Glencoe in Scotland. This is the a salt field in Bolivia. I mean, just beautiful, gorgeous places that not only allow us to experience beauty in one way, but really in a way that all of our senses get to enjoy. Even the beauty of being a mom, even the beauty of seeing our own little babies, of that newborn baby smell, which, oh, is so good. That touch of having them close to us. God has given us so much beauty in the world that we live in the world, the home that He created for us. So, what would that look like for us in our homes to bring in beauty? Well, here are some suggestions. We already talked about it, but a huge way that you can bring beauty into your home is by establishing order, like we just talked about. And that goes back to all of the things that we just said. But I love that the order and the beauty are really interconnected. That the more that we have order in our home, most likely the more beautiful that it's going to be. And the more beautiful that our home is, the more order that we will see established in it. Next is through music. We live in such a crazy day and age that we have these devices in our pockets. Many of us have speakers all throughout our homes where we can be piping music all the time. And this speaks to not only that visual beauty, but the auditory beauty of being able to hear things. What is the ambiance? What is the vibe, if you will, of our home? For several years, I have done something in our home. My husband knows that I do this, but I've never explicitly said this to our children. But I have curated playlists of all different types of genres of music. And at the beginning of every month, I switch the playlist. So one month, it will be classical music that's playing in our home all month long. The next month, it might be disco, literally, like we did that switch from classical to disco. Then the next month, it might be rock and roll. And then the next month, it might be swing. All different types of music I want my children to be exposed to. Music is something that's very important to us. But what is the music? What is the vibe? What is the ambiance that you want not only your kids to experience, but people that come into your home to experience? Another way that we can bring beauty into our homes is through the food that we provide, the food that we cook. Again, another sense. This is the sense of taste. How are we bringing beauty to our tables? I read a book a long time ago. Gosh, this was probably nearly 20 years ago. And in one of the chapters, this gal was talking about how she became convicted at one point that she really only prepared big, nice meals when they were having company over. And she realized one day that she wanted her children and her husband to know that they were just as important, if not more important, than the guests that they host. Now, that doesn't mean that she was advocating that we cook a 3-course meal nightly just to show our families how important they are to us. But it's the thought and intentionality of, I want you to know that you are more important to me than the guests that we host, even though that's super important. I want you to know that I care about creating something beautiful and tasty and enjoyable, even when it's just the 4 of us, or in my case, the 6 of us. That chapter radically changed the way that I thought about planning a meal for my family. And yes, some nights it is mac and cheese and hot dogs, but other nights we do have the opportunity to do steak and our special salad that I make and homemade sourdough. So thinking about the food even that we are providing for our families. Next is artistic expressions. Thinking about, how can I bring in artistic expressions into our home? That could be art on the walls, either by actual artists or your child artist. Pictures hanging on the wall, floral arrangements throughout your home, the centerpiece that you have on your table, even your bedding can be an artistic expression. So thinking through, with my budget, with my know-how, what are the ways that I can play up beauty and intentionally bring something visual, this is speaking of the visual beauty, into my home? Every single one of us is in fact creative. Every single one of us is created in the image of God. God is a creator. We are all creators. It's just in very, very different ways. Some may be very artistically creative, like being able to draw. Some may be interior design creative. Some may be creative in the words that they use, maybe even in writing. Whatever your strength is, really, I encourage you to stop and consider what is the way that I am creative, and play into that in the way that you bring in beauty into your home. Even if your artistic expression is writing poetry or bringing poetry books into your home and leaving them at the various levels that your children are at, leaving them on the side table. Think about your unique artistic expression and how you can bring that into your home environment. The last way that we can bring beauty into our home is kind of what we touched on initially, and that's really our attitude. All of these things, the order that we bring, the music that we listen to, the food that we provide, the artistic expressions that we have, would fall totally flat if the attitude behind that was one that was frazzled, one that was irritable, one that was easily angered and not self-controlled. And so even though attitude appears at the end of this list, it's not because it's the least important, but actually because it's the most important. Our attitude and the way that we talk to and interact with our husbands and our children is the most important way that we can strive to bring beauty into our home. In 1 Corinthians 13, I don't have this verse up there, but in 1 Corinthians 13, which is that beautiful chapter of love that is often very well known, before Paul even gets into listing all of the things that love is patient, love is kind, it doesn't envy, it doesn't boast. Paul starts off that chapter by saying, if I speak in tongues of men but have not love, I'm a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal. And he goes on to say that basically if he does all of these great things, but it's not rooted and founded and even inspired by love, it's basically meaningless. And the same can be applied to us as moms and in our home as the caretakers and overseers of our home. If we're doing all these things, but the basis of that thing is not love, we're just going to be an annoying sound, which is what Paul says, a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. It's annoying. And so really we have to do a heart check of, why do I care? Why do I want to create this sort of haven for my family? And that's why we first have to start with who God is and imitating his character to those around us. The last way that we can imitate God's example is by being hospitable. Letter C is to imitate God's example by being hospitable. And this again goes back to that attitude. The verse that I have for this is Matthew 11:28. I believe this is actually going to 29. And this is where Jesus says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Jesus is the haven for us. Jesus is the place where we can find the refuge, the safety, the rest that not only our physical body craves, but that our spiritual inward person craves. And what's incredible about this is to see that hospitable heart of the God-man, Jesus Christ. He is not standoffish. He is not unwelcoming. Instead, we see the exact opposite, this incredible offer, this incredibly hospitable offer, where Jesus says, "Come to me all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." That's incredible to think about, that welcoming, kind, gentle nature of Jesus Christ. And not only does he promise that he will give us rest, but that he will actually take our burden from us. That's what I want people to experience when they come into my home. When they come into my space, I want people to feel like, oh, this is a place of rest. This is a place of refuge. And not only that, but Erica is willing to help shoulder whatever it is that I'm going through. The first and primary people that must experience our hospitality is our family. Our husband and our children have to experience our hospitality. And that's kind of a weird thing to think about because we're sharing a home with them. Why do I need to be hospitable to them? Because we first had to acknowledge our role. We first had to remember that we are the ones that set that tone. We are the ones that are curating the vibe and the experience of our homes. And so the primary recipients of your and my hospitality must be our immediate family. That means that we need to be ready to receive them home when they're getting home from work or from school. That means that we treat them the way that we want to be treated, which is not talking to in harsh tones, not snapping at them, and being thoughtful about their arrival. How would I want to be greeted how do I want to be greeted when I come home? Do I want to walk into a house that is messy and chaotic, or do I want to walk into a house that is organized and peaceful? So how can I then do that for my family and prepare that well for my family? But the second way that we can do that is by showing hospitality to the people that are extensions of the people in my home. For the last season of our lives, that has looked like so many teenagers in my home. So many teenagers in my home at all times, and I love it. I wanted and prayed that our house would be the house that people wanted to hang out at. And God has been so kind to grant that request from me. But there are little things even that we have done in order to think about how can we make this a place that both students and parents feel comfortable sending their kids to. One of the ways that I've done that by being hospitable is I have something, I'm going to share it with you right now. Don't judge me for this word, but I have something called the crap snacks. And they're the snacks that only get pulled out when teenagers are at our house. They're the snacks that I will not let my kids eat on a normal basis. I'm talking about like fruit roll-ups. I'm talking about like Scooby-Doo snacks. But I have a whole cupboard of all of those yucky snacks in baskets. And when the teenagers come over to my house, all 5 of those baskets get pulled out. And the teenagers, sorry, Tracy, the Cheez-Its get pulled out when Caleb comes over. And they get pulled out. And my kids love it, and their friends love it, and they'll come and tell me, Mrs. Schrader, we ran out of fruit roll-ups. I'm like, okay, I will order more. They know like the snacks that belong there, and they look forward to it. So even those ways of thinking, how can I make my home a place that not only my family feels welcome, but that other people feel welcome and know that they're valued? Going back to Matthew 11:28 through 29, this incredibly beautiful offer of Jesus and this relation to him being our haven, our safety, our place of refuge. I would just encourage you to really begin to think, do you know Jesus in this way? When you read this verse, when you think about the reality of this statement, does this sound like something pie in the sky, or does this sound like something that's the reality of your heart and soul? Have you really experienced what it is like to experience the soul-satisfying peace and rest of knowing Jesus in this way? Knowing him as your haven, as your safe place. Because I can tell you, as someone who has this relationship with Jesus, this is not pie in the sky. This is not something that just, that sounds so nice. This is a reality that I get to experience every single day. That no matter the chaos or disorganization or lack of beauty that I see going on around me, my soul is at complete rest because I have an intimate relationship with the King of creation, with the Savior of the world. Yes, we can imitate him in making our homes a haven. Yes, we can seek to imitate his example. But the reality of experiencing this verse will only happen when you truly know him as your King and your Savior. So I would just love for you to consider those things as we move into talking about how can we implement these things in our home. So with that, I actually want to pray, and then I will send you off to your table discussions. God, thank you so much for who you are. I thank you that your word is so instructive to us, that it really is, it really shows us who you are, what you want from us. God, I thank you that even in who you are, your characteristics, we can pull from that and even figure out how it is that we can be good caretakers of our home, how it is that we can create havens in the space that you have given us stewardship over. Lord, as we saw not only from your word, but also from scientific studies, having a home that is safe and secure and nurturing is actually hugely important. And so, Lord, I ask that you would help each one of us to be able to do that better, that we would all acknowledge none of us are perfect in this, myself included, but how can we encourage one another? How can we spur one another on? What are good creative ideas that we can bounce off of each other and begin to implement in our homes? Lord, I ask that the husbands and the children that are represented by the women in this room today would really begin to experience the full benefits of living in a home that is nurturing. God, I also want to pray specifically about this verse, Matthew 11:28-29. God, I thank you that we see your hospitable nature displayed in this call of Jesus, that anyone who is heavy laden, that anyone who is desiring that peace of soul and mind can come to you. And that God, you yourself take on our burdens and shoulder it for us when we know you as King and Savior. God, I'm so grateful that you have done that in my life. And if there's anyone here today that doesn't know you in that way, I ask that she would long to know you in that same way. So God, please be with us now. Please help this instruction to be helpful and fruitful, and just give us a great time in collaborative thinking even now. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.